Okay, this is the Art of Walking lecture and activity. It could lead to the creation of some new works. This is from a book by William Chapman Sharp, The Art of Walking. Okay, we're first going to look at an example of cave painting wall art from Egypt, and this is not from the Paleolithic period, which we naturally connect to cave paintings. And I think one of the ways you might be able to tell is because there's a lot of human figures in this particular work. Um, Whereas in the Paleolithic period, 2.6 million years ago to 10,000 BCE, before the Common Era, um, there's not really great examples of cave paintings with a lot of human figures. They tended to focus more on animals, and there's all kinds of theories as to why that is true, but we can't really prove anything because the Paleolithic period is marked by it's a time period in which we don't have written languages, and so we can certainly put forward ideas about why there's more human figures in the Neolithic period than the Paleolithic period, but we'll never know why there's not that many in the Paleolithic period. All right. The next object is one that I've been familiar with for a very long time, probably since like 2001. It's the Narmer palette, and it's a pretty small object. You wouldn't know that from these images, and it's the front and back, or back and front, of this particular object. And in on the right, there are some animal necks that are twisting together, and inside that little hole, you would have black eye makeup. Um, and so this is really actually something. This is an art object that actually is used for something in the culture, which is kind of fun. And it also is showing you the uniting of Upper and Lower Egypt through war. And then in the tombs, in a lot of tombs, almost all the tombs, there are little sort of sculptures. And in this one, of course, the man is plowing the field with oxen. And I don't know if anybody's ever taken this one and used it to and did a sort of a recreation of it, or a different look at it. But it's just kind of fun to see these examples of walking way back in 1981 to 1885 BCE in Egypt. All right, so there's various different periodizations of Greek art, and one of them is archaic, which is sort of the first period in which we see sculptures in the round. Okay, so going back to those two very important sculptures, so the Kurios sculpture always has one foot forward, and then hands to the side, fists clenched, and then the hair is very developed, and also what's called the archaic smile, which is kind of a little bit of an upturn of the mouth. And then the Doryphorus, my apologies for not having the slide in front of you. The way this works sometimes is I'll stop and then it'll go forward one slide. So my apologies. But anyways, the Doryphorus is a spear bearer. It's from the High Classical period in sculpture, from 450 BCE. And actually, Mia has a example of this particular sculpture. I'm not exactly sure where it is at this point. Sometimes it's in one of the sort of rotundas, but I don't know if it's there currently. We at least know it's probably in the Greek and Roman cultural galleries. And then this is a relief sculpture, obviously. It's sculpture off a flat surface. And this is called Gravida. And I'd love to see somebody take this and do their own interpretation of it. All right. And then we have, this is a theme in the book, Walking Impaired, an allegorical image of an old age in the Romance of the Rose is on the right. And it comes from Bruges. And it's 1490 to 1500. So it's actually the High Renaissance, actually. But these images come from what are called illuminated manuscripts, which were really popular during the Middle Ages. And so on the left is a decorated initial D on a music manuscript, France or Flanders. They're not sure where it's from. Okay, so let's keep going. And then this is showing a pilgrim on the road to the shrine of St. James in Belgium. And we know that because they have a staff and their hat is decorated with shells. Those two would tell you that this person is on a pilgrimage. Okay, we skipped over the images of Adam and Eve. The most important one is the Masaccio expulsion from the Garden of Eden. That's one that students love to recreate. The other one is just the temptation of Adam and Eve, but the movement is more in the Masaccio work. Okay, so Conrad Witz created this image of basically Jesus walking on water, which is always a fun thing. And it's called The Miraculous Draught of Fishes. And Jesus is in the red robe. All right. And then, to sort of get away from just always it being about Christianity, the author of the book put in the traveling figure, and it's from a Jewish illuminated manuscript, and it's called The Wandering Jew, and it's another example of an image from a book. And then you have this incredibly detailed, very busy work from Gentile Bellini from Venice, and it is the Miracle of the Cross at the Bridge of Saint Lorenzo, 1600. And there's just all kinds of things going on, and I think I have some details. Let's see. Yes. Okay, so here is the cross coming across a Venice canal, which is a lot of fun. And then there's a man who's about to leap into the water on the right. And then everybody else is sort of watching the cross going through the canal. Okay. And then here is one of the most well-known works of art from the High Renaissance, which is basically 1490 to 1523-ish. And this is Raphael's The School of Athens. It's in the Pope's apartments, and it's basically to the right is are two very famous philosophers, Aristotle and Socrates. And one of them is being modeled by Leonardo da Vinci. And then the rest of the figures represent different fields of study, astronomy, different areas of the humanities, poetry, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, a very, very famous piece that I wasn't surprised was in the book. Okay, and then we have this really interesting image, and it's showing a courtesan and blind Cupid. And we're going to see in the next slide that you flip the paper, and underneath she's wearing what are called, I looked this up how to pronounce this. I think it's chopines, which are these really, really high heels that women would wear in the Italian Renaissance time period. Okay. Then we have just this, I can't imagine anybody's going to take this one up as their influence, but it's Louis XIV taking a walk next to, of course, the Palace of Versailles, which is one of the most incredible palaces ever made in world history. And one of the things that Louis XIV demanded from the French aristocracy is that they would live together at Versailles for lengthy periods of time. And yeah, so he's out walking among his people. Okay, so Romanticism is a movement in the early-ish 19th century, and it's all about woman, man versus nature. Nature wins, which you're not necessarily seeing with this. This is Chalk Cliffs of Rügen, and this is by a very famous artist from Germany, current-day Germany, Caspar David Friedrich. And the next image is one of the most well-known images in all of art history, The Wonder Above the Sea Fog. And actually, this painting is used in a lot of on a lot of covers of paperbacks. Some of it from the actual Romantic period, but also it's been interpreted as part of just the overall culture in Europe beyond just the time of Romanticism. All right. Now we're going to look at a group of works from both France and England. And this is Boilly's Pay to Pass. And before I saw this image a couple of years ago in this book, I had no idea that you at times would pay a particular person to walk on a board, a plank, in the midst of a muddy street. And so that's what's happening here. All right. Okay, so starting in the early 19th century, the 1800s, there is a real just sort of revolution that happens in art history, in art, in which artists make these very satirical images of the aristocracy, which, if you think about it, makes sense. Since, this is from 1822, Monstrosities of 1822. So these are images that are meant to expose the sort of vacuousness of the French aristocracy, those that continue to be the elite. Okay. And then you've got the flaneur on the left, and then the very, very famous, of course, image by Millet, the sewer. All right. And then here we go, the invention of photography, which happens in the 1830s. And this is a photograph, Chimney Sweeps Walking, from 1851. And then this is another type of sort of political cartoon from America, and we don't know who the artist is. This is Bloomerism, an American custom, so it's making fun of American women who, through the bloomers, are not exposing their legs, but are actually much more comfortable than they would be in other sort of fashions that were popular during the time of the 19th century. Okay, and then this is one of my favorite Monets, Woman with Parasol, Madame Monet and her son, so it's his family. And yeah, it could be a good source for somebody's work, I think. All right, I looked it up. This is Caillebotte. You can say it that way. There's other ways to say it too. Paris Street, Rainy Day. It's from the Chicago Art Institute, and there's a guy named Haussmann who changed forever the architectural composition of Paris, and he really destroyed a lot of the old architecture and put in the new architecture, which is what you see today in Paris. And this all happened in the 19th century, the latter half of the 19th century. And then I thought it could be kind of fun to put in this. This is Vincent van Gogh's Shoes. It's always fascinating to me how you can look at a Van Gogh and realize, just by looking at it, you don't have to have a label or anything. You know it's his work because of the gestural brushstroke. And then, last but not least, for Van Gogh, we have Portrait of a Peasant. One of the things that Van Gogh was known for, of course, was his incredible empathy for humankind. And he often painted people from lower economic classes. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's so respected today. Okay, and then we're going to go to another new medium, film. This is the Lumiere brothers, workers leaving the Lumiere factory, 1895. And it's just interesting to think about, both with photography and film, like why did they decide to have that as their subject for this brand new medium? It would create, I think, a really nice debate. And then here's one of the versions of the Scream. And so here we have Edvard Munch. And this is actually something that a lot of people don't know, is that it is actually a part of a frieze. It was not made to be an individual work. And it was part of a whole sort of series. I can't remember how many paintings are in the actual part of it. But the Scream, of course, becomes the most well-known. Most people think, obviously that it's meant to be just its standalone work, but it's not. Okay. And then here we go. So this is from 1899-1901. By this time, the ideas of Karl Marx were put forward in the Communist Manifesto, and that basically history can be explained by the rich exploiting the poor. And yeah, this is the Fourth Estate, the Path of Workers, which I could see being on the cover of a paperback version of the Communist Manifesto. From that to this. A lot of people love to recreate this one. This is The Wizard of Oz, publicity still from 1939. I don't know if everybody knows that the movie that we see so many times on TV was created so long ago in the 1930s. Okay, this is a work by Norman Rockwell, probably one of the most famous commercial artists of the 20th century in America. And it's called The Problem We All Live With. It's Ruby Bridges being escorted by U.S. Marshals to her elementary school. And there's not very many examples of Norman Rockwell showing the civil rights movement or any of the movements during the 20th century. He was very controlled by the Saturday Evening Post, and they didn't allow him to become very political in his covers of their magazine. But finally, in 1963, he makes this painting. And then this is one of my favorite photographs from the civil rights movement. This is James Carrelis. This is Selma to Montgomery March, Alabama, 1965. All right, there we go. Okay, my favorite illustrator is Kadir Nelson. He's an African-American illustrator. And there's a lot of times in which his works are on the front cover of The New Yorker. This one is from July 3rd, 2023. And then on the left is a work from June 29th, 2020. And then, sorry, that's on the left. And then Wheel Life, New Yorker Magazine, July 1st, 2019. He really just paints African-American culture, and that's, probably there's other things that he does, but that's what he's famous for sure. Okay. And this is a work by Luis Jimenez, Border Crossing, and it's made out of fiberglass, which is what Corvettes are made out of. Okay, and then let's go to a native artist, Jim Denami, who had an incredible show after his death, actually, at MIA a couple of years ago. And this is Attack of Fort Snelling Bar and Grill. And it's a little bit of a take on Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. Sort of in the middle, there's the diner. And definitely this is an example of somebody interpreting a famous work of art, which is something you might do from having looked at this lecture. And then I'm always fascinated by artists, Japanese-American artists in the internment camps during World War II. This is Okubo's Citizen 13660. And then, let's look at this. Yeah, here's the book. Very, very, very famous book, which I might have a copy of, actually. Which is her illustrating life in the internment camp that she was forced into. And then, last but not least, we're going to look at The Silly Walk, which is from Monty Python's Flying Circus. And this is John Cleese, The Ministry of Silly Walks. And there we go. We've done all of the examples in art history of walking